My whole career is based on a real dedication to integrity. And the people that I work with all know that. When people are letting me into their lives, they're giving me a huge privilege, which is they are sharing a part of themselves, and often an intimate part of themselves. And with that comes great responsibility, and it's not a static responsibility, it's a moving responsibility. It happens in fluid ways, and I think a lot about that, and that's really important to me. Like, it would horrify me if I ever took a picture or put a picture out or took advantage of one of my subjects in a way because I had that privilege to enter their lives.
I'm Srini Rao, and this is the Unmistakable Creative Podcast, where you get a window into the stories and insights of the most innovative and creative minds who've started movements, built thriving businesses, written best-selling books, and created insanely interesting art. For more, check out our 500-episode archive at unmistakablecreative.com. George, welcome to the Unmistakable Creative. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us.
Thanks so much. Good to be here.
Yeah, so I was introduced to you by way of our mutual friend, Joseph Logan, who has been sending me some really amazing and interesting people. And when I got to look at my first peek of your photography work, I was immediately intrigued, given that we both have Glenn Beck in common as a friend, which we will get to. But before we get there, I want to start with a question that I have not started the show with before, and that is, which of the two parents that you have were you closest to, and why?
Wow. Well, I was very close with both of my parents. My dad was really special. He's been gone about 20 years, and I remember, so little from growing up outside of the pictures, but all of my memories are really sensual. Uh-huh. I remember waiting on the steps for him to come home from work. He worked about an hour from Pittsburgh, and I remember just waiting, and then just him coming up the street and in the driveway, and just that hug, mm-hmm. Was just really, really powerful. But he was a very honest and happy and beautiful guy, and gave me my first camera at the age of 7. And the interesting thing about my father was, this is a photo reference, but when you use a lens, there's a thing called depth of field, mm-hmm. which means that when you're wide open, what's on either side of the focal point is out of focus. It's a very narrow focal point. And I often think of growing up as having a very narrow depth of field. We lived very much in the moment. We didn't talk about the past that much. We didn't talk about the future that much. We didn't even talk about our day that much. It was, we were together and we were happy, and it was very much about that, and that's continued into my later life. After my father died, and my mother, we become even closer. She's 89. She lives in the same house that she grew up in and that I grew up in. So there's a lot of history there. Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, like over the course of your life, having grown up in such a state of presence, we have a world in which we're not present now, between digital cameras, phones, text message. I'm curious, like, how have you maintained that throughout the course of your life? Like, and how would other people do that?
Well, I wrote a book called The Unforgettable Photograph, and the core idea with that was really appreciating your life in new ways and appreciating what's right in front of you each day. Almost even before you open your eyes in the morning, there are things going on. There are maybe the smell of breakfast. There's maybe someone that you're listening to. I'm listening for my kids' feet to come running up to the bed and say good morning, or going down meeting them. But I feel like there are 3 things that I kind of think about every day. One is seeing my world from a different angle. Mm-hmm. That there are certain rituals that we have every day that we see in the same way every day, and if you flip it and look at it from a completely different angle, it's a whole different world on what you're doing every day. For instance, I was going to the to the bus stop every day last year and dropping my kids off, and all the parents are dropping their kids off and they're waving. I have 7 and 10-year-old boys. And we wave at the boys and they go on the bus and they wave back and they go off. And I'm wondering towards the end of the school year, well, what's their experience up on the bus of this daily ritual that we have? So I got permission and I went up on the bus with them one day and sat with them and looked out. And there's a whole other world going on right there that I was watching from this one angle every day. When you look out from their angle, the windows are very cinematic, very thin and wide, and you have all these parents like kissing, blowing kisses and sending hugs and drawing on the windows and doing all these incredibly sweet things. And then the way the kids situate themselves in the bus, I mean, it's this whole other social network going on up there that I never saw before. And the next day I go to the bus stop and the parents say, wow, did you go on the bus yesterday? What were you doing? I said, it was incredible. It's just 3 steps and it's a whole other world. It's a whole different way of seeing what we do every single day. And the parents go, well, I want to go up on the bus. And I said, it's 3 steps. You just have to take 3 steps and you're there. Yeah. And you know what? It's sad, but no other parents ever took those 3 steps. And I feel like so many experiences in our lives, we can take a couple steps and see our world from a completely different angle, and it totally changes our way of appreciating it. One other thing that I do, people ask me all the time, like, how do I take better pictures? And my first answer is always close your eyes and use all of your senses, because people think that taking pictures is really about just looking. This is what my coffee looks like. This is what the sunset looks like. This is what the mountains look like. And it's really more about, what does this feel like? What does it sound like? What does it taste like? And then doing that with your eyes closed awakens all of your other senses, and then open your eyes and add that to your picture taking. And then the third thing that I think about a lot came about recently. I was invited to speak on a panel about beauty, which I had never really thought about that much, objectively. And I realized that everything I do every day is a search for raw, deep beauty. And I find it everywhere. I find it at breakfast. I find it at the schoolyard with the kids. I'm very involved with my kids. But I'm the dad that's down on their knees talking to the other kids each day, taking their pictures. I photograph, the whole process. But there's just such incredible beauty in the most everyday, obvious things. And I don't mean obvious like your coffee. I mean obvious like your feelings. I want to photograph what things feel like and the beauty that that's in front of us.
Wow. So, I'm interested in, that moment when your dad gave you your first camera. And the question that came to my mind when you told me that was, do you remember the first picture that you took that made you realize that this is what you wanted to do with your life?
Well, one of the funny things that happened is I wound up going in the darkroom pretty early. And there was something about being in that room that I found very, very seductive. The feel of the paper and the chemicals, watching the magic of the whole process. I really loved that. So I kind of came in through the darkroom and wanted to create more images to develop in the darkroom. But as I've been photographing every day since the age of 7. I'm 62 now. So I've taken, a lot of pictures, and I realized that it's my way of capturing feelings and capturing memories and capturing the way people connect with each other. I'm really obsessed with how we all approach each other and being connected. I photograph strangers every day. And when I was growing up, I was photographing more friends and more schoolmates and things like that. But I just love the freedom that you know what? I feel like you're photographing me now. I'm used to being on this side of the camera, behind the camera, and when you're doing that, you're really asking lots of questions. You're wondering, what is the story? What am I feeling? How are we all connected? And I think, early on, it was very intuitive, that process. And now I'm more aware of the process, but I can't say that it's any less of a mystery.
Mm-hmm. So walk me through. That
doesn't talk about my first photographs, though.
Yeah. So walk me through from being 7 with that first camera to how you get to today. What's been the journey that led you here?
Wow. I'm really lucky. Very early on in my life in high school, I knew that I wanted to take pictures. So I had that kind of guiding ambition. I went to Rhode Island School of Design after high school. I worked for my high school newspaper and high school yearbook and did all of that, and then went to Rhode Island School of Design, and I wound up having an extraordinary teacher there named Wendy McNeil. And she told me every week, like a mantra, don't think, just take pictures. Mm-hmm. The other amazing thing that happened there was I went up to see a guy named Dwayne Michaels give a talk at MIT. And I recorded it on a little cassette recorder, and he spoke very quickly. And I went back and I spent a week transcribing this whole talk. And that talk really became my Bible. And Dwayne's just he's an amazing photographer. He's now 88. And what he said up at that talk was that taking pictures and writing is his way of saying, I was there, I saw this, I felt this, I heard this, it happened. And that connected with me so deeply. Many years later, I would run into Dwayne periodically, and he would say, call me. And he was such a big force in my life that I could never call him. But I finally did this last fall, and I've visited him several times in New York, and it's kind of extraordinary when your hero turns out to be the real deal. Mm-hmm. But I left RISD, graduated from RISD, went to New York. A friend of mine was the main assistant for Annie Leibovitz, who was also a hero, and I got the job as third assistant for Annie. And she and the first assistant would argue and fight all the time. It was very, very volatile. And I knew that I would get the job as her first assistant if I just hung tight, and I figured out my strategy of dealing with her, which was that I would do anything for her, which I told her when I got that position, but she could never yell at me. Mm-hmm. So for a year, we had this extraordinary experience. It was the last 6 months of Rolling Stone and the first 6 months of Vanity Fair for her. Vanity Fair was just starting up again. And we went all over the world, and I was her only assistant and her main assistant. And I just had, the most amazing time. And what I learned from her was not how to light, was not how to use this camera or that kind of film. I learned choreography. There's a certain rhythm to the way a professional photographer kind of interacts with their subjects, with their clients, and I learned Annie's choreography. And then when I left her, I had to figure out my own choreography of how I would go through similar experiences but create pictures that were my own. The funny thing is, after a year of having truly this amazing relationship with Annie, she got upset about something. She turned and yelled at me one day, and I said, Annie, you know the deal. And I just walked out, and that was it. But we actually ended on we both appreciated each other's a lot, and I was, in the dedications of her books and Good Feelings, even though it was kind of a sudden end. Mm-hmm. So then I got an assignment. I had met an art director towards the end of Annie at Geo magazine, which is one of the biggest photojournalism magazines at the time, along with Life. It's a German magazine, but they had an American edition. And I was at an anti-nuclear rally in New York, and I was following a group called Bread and Puppet Theater from northern Vermont. And I just thought they were an incredible story. And I see this picture editor for Geo in the crowd as I'm going up Fifth Avenue, and I run out and I say, Elizabeth, it was Elizabeth Biondi, who later became a picture editor at at the New Yorker. And I said, this is an incredible story. We should do a story on them. And she said, come and see me. So I went to her office and got the assignment. But I only owned one camera and one lens, and that was it. And I started going, it was the middle of August, I started going up to northern Vermont to photograph Bread and Puppet Theater, who were amazing, but they were completely photophobic. They didn't want to have anything to do with my photography, except they gave me permission to be there. So I shot like a fly on the wall and took all these pictures and traveled around with them and built this beautiful story, but it was missing something. And I kept going up to northern Vermont and back down to New York. I was using up credit at all the labs in New York. I had no money left. And it was the beginning of November, and I had a meeting at Geo, and they said, you have one more chance to go up there. If you don't get the pictures that this story needs, we're gonna kill it. Which would have meant I would have had to leave New York because I would have been out of money. So I go up to northern Vermont. It's getting dark early. It's my last day there. And I put a piece of black fabric against the barn. And almost in tears at the end of the rehearsal, I say, I just need you to stand in front of this black fabric in your puppets. They're big mass. For 5 minutes, I have to get these pictures. And they shrugged and came down, and they stood there. I had no lights. The sun went down, and I went back down to New York with these pictures. I had a big meeting with the whole editorial staff at Geo, and I showed these pictures, and they all applauded, and I got the cover and 14 pages on the inside, and that launched my career. At the same time, I had a portfolio of pictures of Annie. That's all that I had to show. It was a big 16 by 20 black and white portfolio. And I would go to magazines and I'd say, I'd like to work for you. So I went to Avenue magazine, which was a beautiful black and white, a lot of art photographers magazine that was handed out by Limousine in New York. And the average person, I think, the net worth was $1 million. And they had this beautiful publication. And I went and saw the editor, and he said, I'll put you on our try to use list. I really like your work. And I said, please don't put me on your try to use list. I'm not leaving your office until you give me an assignment. And the guy laughed. His name was Michael Schneerson, who's a great writer and has worked for Vanity Fair in the years since. And he gave me an assignment. And I did it, and he gave me another assignment. I worked for Avenue magazine every month for years. Then I would go to the Condé Nast building, which was then at 45th and Madison. And I'd go up the interior steps. This is before the high security. And I would start at the top and go down the interior steps and stop at every magazine. And I would never get to the lobby without an assignment. And sometimes it was at Vanity Fair doing copy work they were doing a story on the Flying Walendas, and I would copy pictures out of their scrapbooks. Or I'd go to Self magazine and get a little assignment on some little beauty regimen or whatever it was. But I was just going to be a photographer, and there was no that had to happen. I got an assignment for Rolling Stone. I think they were paying me $75 to photograph the Violent Femmes, who had just come out with their first album, and I was supposed to go to Brooklyn and photograph them. And at that point, I owned one light. And I go to Brooklyn, and the light doesn't work. And in my memory, I burst into tears. I probably didn't, but I was, visibly upset. And they said, listen, come out to Milwaukee. You can stay with the drummer, Victor, and take all the pictures you want. So I didn't have a credit card at the time, but I found a place in Chicago that would rent a car for cash. And I go to Milwaukee, and I stay with the drummer, and I take these pictures that were, I shot them for 3 days, and we became friends. And I got my first story in Rolling Stone. That's how I started. The rest is just, it was a combination of being able to develop a photography career at a really optimal time when there weren't that many photographers. It's before, Instagram and cell phones and all of that. It's a time where magazines were running pictures really large and really appreciating photography. And I just had a really amazing run. The one thing that I didn't do is I really wasn't settling in on a style. I was settling in more on a sensibility, which could be applied to anything. So I would get an assignment from Fortune to photograph Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, and they had never been photographed together. And it's at Steve Jobs' house, and they never were photographed together after that either. But I go into these situations, and the way that I see the world is not surfaces. I'm not interested in what someone's wearing or what their hair is doing or how their makeup is or any of that. I'm kind of after something else. It's really, rather than looking wide, I'm looking deep. I'm really trying to find, it sounds corny, but I'm really trying to find a soulfulness to the photograph and to the person. And it's actually in the opposite order. I'm like having this experience with my subjects and then photographing it. But the photography is not actually what I'm that interested in. I'm really interested in creating an experience. And, to your point at the very beginning, when I go in, I don't know what I'm after. I try, and when you read about Keith Jarrett, the jazz pianist, he gets on the stage when he's doing a solo performance, and he clears his head. He has nothing in his head of where he's going to go with this performance. He just kind of reaches in and feels it. And when you're good at your craft, you can do that. I've been taking pictures a long time, and I know that anything that I can think up or feel, I can create and make work. So I go into these shootings and I have no agenda. Oftentimes my clients will have an agenda, but I won't. Which I'll execute. But a lot of times they're hiring me for this process that is. It's just going in and opening yourself up. And, people say that they're vulnerable or try and be vulnerable. Well, that's the place that I photograph out of every day. And I create a space that for me is not really safe and is not really even clear, but then through the interactions with the person, through our discussions, through a great deal of empathy, hopefully, I find a place that is special. And, lots of times when I photograph celebrities and lots of other people, they'll look at these pictures and go, that's exactly who I am. And it's because I'm not trying to take that perfectly lit, perfectly made up, perfectly messaged even picture, but I'm trying to go to that place that's like, oh, I know that feeling. I know what that is. And it's sometimes, if you think of the piano as white and black keys, and the white keys being all the major pictures, I feel like I'm playing the black notes a lot. That I'm going for pictures that are a little bit smaller than the big iconic picture, but hopefully more charged with feeling and meaning. Mm-hmm. So my career, I've just had a really wide mix. I've done a lot of branding work for big companies, from Microsoft and Cardinal Health and IBM. Like, I've had a wonderful run at IBM. I photographed poets and celebrities. I've done a lot of movie posters and TV ads, to go into the White House and photographing presidents, Democratic ones. I grew up a big liberal in Pittsburgh, and my job is glorifying people. So if Republican politicians, especially in my youth, is where I kind of drew the line, saying like, I just can't go there, even though I wish them well and respect them and want them to do a great job. It's just like, I'm not going to be taking those pictures.
Yeah. So I don't know about you, but vacuuming is not one of those things that I ever look forward to doing. But as you know, your environment has a huge impact on your creativity. So I still like it to be clean wherever I'm living and working. But now it doesn't have to be something that you deal with. If you're like me and you grew up in the 80s, you probably fantasized about the day when cleaning your house would be like it was for the Jetsons, meaning you don't have to lift a finger. Well, the good news is that we're already kind of living in that future. And the easiest way to make sure your floors are clean every day is with the iRobot Roomba Robot Vacuum. It cleans up after itself. The Clean Base automatic dirt disposal takes convenience to a new level, automatically empties its own bin into an allergen lock bag that holds 60 days of debris and traps 99% of pollen, mold, and dust mites, so you can forget about vacuuming for months at a time. Let the Roomba clean for you instead. It learns your home, finds dirt, and empties itself on its own. It's got powerful cleaning performance made effortless. Remember, if it's not from iRobot, it's not a Roomba. To learn more, go to irobot.com/unmistakable. Wow. So many questions. So I want to start with Annie Leibovitz, because I think even if you know absolutely nothing about photography, you know that name, and it's almost synonymous with the word photography in my mind. Like, the moment you mentioned that, you talked about what you learned in terms of skill from her. I'm really curious what you learned from somebody like that in terms of mindset and success that informed your career.
Well, Annie is the real deal. I mean, she is like heart, soul, blood. Every piece of her is, at least when I was working with her, was into taking the best possible picture that she could. And it was her entire life, like each shooting that she did. And she would do lots of research and do lots of thinking and sit there, scratching her head and really stressing over the pictures and really trying to find some place. And this process is kind of like having an itch on your back that you can't quite scratch. You can't quite reach. And with Annie, she is, especially at the time that I'm with her, just like the images are everything. The experience and it's complicated because she's going in. She was not quite the celebrity that she is now. Then she definitely did not have the budgets that she has now, and she was going in, and it just did not matter. She was going to get to the finish line. Like, she was going to, beg and steal and go completely broke or whatever it took to get those pictures. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing. Like, I'll tell you a funny story. I was on the shooting where she painted Steve Martin up where he's wearing the white tuxedo and the black Franz Klein paint across him. And at that time with Annie, she didn't have first of all, it was shooting film and it wasn't digital. And we would get all this film, and it would be in kind of a white, unmarked box, and we would go to the airport and fly home, and she would go up to Rolling Stone and edit the film. This time with that shoot, which is one of the most, famous shoots in her canon, we go to the airport, I give Annie the film, and we fly off to New York. When we get to New York, we're in the car going back into the city. She goes, "Where's the film?" I said, "I don't have the film. You have the film." And she said, "I don't know where the film is, but don't talk to me until you have it." So I had to hire 3 assistants in New York, in Los Angeles, to go through the airport. And they're speaking to everyone, and they're tracing all of our footsteps. They're going through the garbage at the rent-a-car company because it's in this unmarked white box. Finally, someone from behind the ticket counter waves this box and says, "Is this what you're looking for?" And, things like that on Annie's shoot, as solid as these shoots are, that's how fragile they are too. They are moments that are part of a creative process that is very pure, and the commerce around them is really brought in by other people. I mean, I think it's really hard with creatives. We're all having to be business people and having to be marketers and all this. And the truth is, most creatives are really good at being creatives, and they aren't so good at the commercial stuff. I mean, it's pretty widely known that Annie almost went bankrupt a couple years ago and had to put up her whole body of work as collateral to get a loan. Mm-hmm. It's really hard to balance the business part of it. However, the lesson that I learned from Annie and almost every other creative that's successful that I've been around is what my wife tells me every single day, and it's her mantra, which is the work leads to the work.
Yeah. Yeah, that actually is such a perfect setup for my next question, which is, you've been commercially successful as an artist and a creative professional for what it sounds like is a good amount of your career, and you've really been in a fortunate position. And I think, to some degree, I can say the same, given that I've had the fortunate pleasure of having the privilege of writing books. I'm really curious, has your definition of success in your field changed with age? And if so, how?
Well, the biggest way that it changed was having kids. Mm-hmm. Because up until then, you figure, well, if I'm having a good year or a bad year, I can kind of make it work. Once you have kids, it's like a whole different equation. That's not only, what you're doing now, but you have to be putting money away for their future and school and, and you don't have the freedom of time, of unlimited time to do your work. So that's definitely changed. But the thing that doesn't change is what drives me is this itch. What drives me every single day is I get blown away by meeting people, and I get blown away by this search for beauty. And I go out in the world and I find amazing people every day. And it's really parts of people that get overlooked or too busy and it's not even taking pictures all the time. Last week I was in New York with a woman that started Daybreaker, which is wake up at 6 a.m. and do yoga for an hour and then 2 hours of heavy duty dancing. And she has this going on, these big events in 20 different cities. And she's super successful and she's dreaming it up. And we did not talk. I mean, we both looked at her board of sponsors and says this, acknowledge this is what keeps the lights on. But I don't think that when you're a creative that you make your decisions based on money. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course you have to put the lights on. Of course, that's a huge responsibility. But I think that the work really does lead to the work, that if you do great work and you allow yourself to evolve and take risks and really, I've been taking pictures so long, and yet every day I feel like I'm just an inch away from taking this picture that's going to define me. Mm. And I never go look at my work and say, oh, I don't have to take any more pictures because there they are. After millions of pictures that I've taken, I'm still going to go out this afternoon and take this one picture that I've been trying to find my whole life and hopefully will never find, because it's this journey that has been so rich and continues to give me so much. And this camera opens up all these doors to all these people. I mean, my camera has essentially opened the door to get to speak to you and all of your listeners today. And that's just, that's such a gift. And I just, the commerce part, to be honest, eludes me a little bit. What I do is surround myself with people that create the framework and do the briefs and do and kind of do the billing and handle all of the business stuff that puts the lights on and puts food on our table and pays the rent.
Yeah. Were there any major low points in your career?
Well, the last several years have been rough because I feel like we are all inundated with so much. This is going to sound like an old guy complaining, and I really don't mean it that way. But we're so inundated with images and media and so many podcasts that we want to listen to and all this stuff that photography in so many places is not really appreciated. In my case, I feel like I don't need the photographs to be appreciated, but I do need the storytelling and the fact that I'm going to come into your company, let's say, and tell and really understand and share what makes it extraordinary. not just what the product looks like, not what the CEO looks like, but really what makes this chemistry amazing. And I'm very good at that, and I love doing that. And I feel like it gets judged on the output, which is the photography, and that's a hard sell right now because people are looking at so many images that no images really are more valuable than a swipe.
Yeah. The other thing that really struck me was that you said your job is to glorify people. And, you've clearly photographed some very iconic figures in our culture. Former presidents, people like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, our mutual friend Glenn Beck. And a couple of things I'm curious about is, one, what do you see that, we necessarily don't when you look through the lens? And how do you glorify somebody who already has such, sort of glorified status in the eyes of the public? Like, how do you take somebody like that and glorify them more?
Well, my father used to always tease me that I'm never impressed by anyone's success, which is, I certainly respect people's success, but I can't, when I'm with them, it has to be a level playing field, or I can't get to my pictures. So when I go in, I'm not thinking about how famous someone is. I'm not thinking about how much money they have. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm talking about their kids. I'm talking about, what their day is like. I'm talking about, I bring up things that seem so random. And sometimes I even go beyond that. It's just, I'm not even making sense. It's more the rhythm of the words I'm using than actually trying to make sense, just to get someone into a place that we can share a feeling or an idea that they would not normally share with a photographer. It's really funny when I speak to guys that do focus groups for brands, and they go in and they have their ways of breaking people down. Well, you go in with the camera, and if you are experienced and have done it the way that I've done it, people open up like really quickly, and really for me, there's an easy path in, and that's the place that I mine for the work that I do.
Wow. I think the other thing that's really interesting to me is, over the course of our conversation, there's this thought that has been running through my head about the work that you do. You mentioned the idea of creating an unforgettable photograph. And what I walked away from that thought thinking, I think that your work is about more than creating an unforgettable photograph. It's about creating unforgettable memories in our lives. And I am curious, one, if you were to tell somebody, okay, this is how you create a life that is unforgettable, what would you tell them?
First of all, thank you so much for that. I really, it's hard for me because I'm so deep into this sometimes to understand what I'm doing. I am like very deep into this process in a very pure way, and to step back from it and say that I am creating this experience or this feeling is actually what I'm after. I think that for other people that are wanting to create, a special life or an unforgettable life, there are certain things that are really pretty obvious. Like, your relationships are really important. Your values are really important. Trust and responsibility, everyone teaches you that or talks about it or uses it as brand speak, but it's really important. My whole career is based on a real dedication to integrity. And the people that I work with all know that. When people are letting me into their lives, they're giving me a huge privilege, which is they are sharing a part of themselves, and often an intimate part of themselves. And with that comes great responsibility, and it's not a static responsibility, it's a moving responsibility. It happens in fluid ways, and I think a lot about that, and that's really important to me. Like, it would horrify me if I ever took a picture or put a picture out or took advantage of one of my subjects in a way because I had that privilege to enter their lives. I can give you a crazy example, which was I went to photograph Aretha Franklin years ago, and I go to her house and she greets me and she says, "I'll be out in a couple hours when I'm ready." And she comes out dressed as Queen Nefertiti, total diva, totally done up. She lets me take maybe 5 or 6 pictures and she says, "I'm going to change." 2 or 3 hours after that, she comes dressed as something else, like magnificent and beautiful and wonderful. And this goes on the whole day. At the end of the day, she goes in the kitchen, gets a plate of food, she's in a pair of jeans. She goes on her sofa, unbuttons her pants, just the top, just to let it breathe, puts the plate of food on her lap and falls asleep. And I'm packing up to leave. I could take that picture. It would be well known, I'm sure. Here's Aretha Franklin asleep with a plate of food on her lap, this whole thing. I did not take that picture. And there are many, many pictures that I have not taken because I respected the person and I respected the fact that they had let me into their life. And I really appreciate it so much. Not only famous people letting me into their lives, I'm doing a big story now for Dick's Sporting Goods on the emotional side of youth sports. Mm-hmm. And there are so many parents allowing their children to be photographed by me in their bedrooms with all their medals, in, dugouts where they're living half the summer on a baseball team, in joy and in sadness, the full range. And I consider it such a privilege to be allowed to take these pictures. Even the mom reaching over on a hot day in Nashville, putting deodorant on her, 11-year-old's armpits or whatever. It's like I'm getting to take these pictures and people are allowing me to, and there's a certain trust involved that is crucial to the way that I work. And it's the same trust that you have with your partner. The reason my marriage is so good is because of the same values. Like we do, I respect my wife. I am completely honest with her. I listen to her. I appreciate her every day. From the moment I'm barely awake until, if she falls asleep before me, I'm looking over thinking how lucky I am. And that's the way that I approach everything I do.
Wow. So I have 2 last questions for you. And this one is kind of just out of the blue and off the wall. And it's based on an article that I have that is currently getting a lot of visibility on Medium titled What We Should Have Learned in School But Never Did. And I've never asked this question to anybody in an interview, but what do you think we should have learned in school but never did?
Wow. Great article. I have to read it. I think what I just told, I think that a lot of, I'm going to speak to boys. And I think that a lot of boys are taught and we're taught about success. And we're taught about these are the things you need to do for success. You need to study hard. You need to be disciplined. You need to follow through. You need to learn math and learn this and that. And what we really aren't taught is what happens if we're successful. How do we act if we're successful? How do we treat our employees? How do we treat our friends? How do we treat women? That it's not discussed. It's not taught. I think a lot of this whole Me Too movement is a result of men not being taught how to be successful and how to behave and how to respect. And those are really simple, obvious things that I think are kind of left out of the mix. I consciously talk to my children about respect and about appreciating everyone, not only the people you like, but the people that are on the other team and the people that are struggling and the people that don't have it as good. And I know, we should appreciate it, that people are hurting, but I'm talking, really as human beings. And a lot of the conversations that go on now, especially politically, I feel like we aren't respecting each other as human beings. We are all trying to find success and to find meaning in everything, but the meaning is in our relationships and in our respect for other people, especially people that we don't really know.
Wow. So I have one last question for you, which is how we finish all of our interviews at the Unmistakable Creative. What do you think it is that makes somebody or something unmistakable?
Well, I think that we're all unmistakable. I think that we're all really special and that we're all amazing. My job and my mission on this earth for this, quickly passing life is to find what is amazing inside of every person, and it's different inside of every person, and that's what makes what I do amazing. Like it would be impossible to take the same photograph of every person. It's because everyone's special in a different way, and everyone has a special story, and everyone is extraordinary in sometimes the most obvious ways. And what I've tried to do is to tell those stories.
Wow.
And before we finish, I would love to talk about Glenn for a minute.
Yes, absolutely. Please do.
It's an amazing story. I mean, when I first photographed Glenn Beck, I was in my no photographing Republican stage, but he was at Headline News, and I didn't know what his politics were. So I do this shooting with my friends at Turner, and we did about 10 different ideas, one of which was he was on a diet. So we put a dog collar on him so dogs can't scratch themselves, and gave him a piece of cake that he wasn't allowed to eat. And every idea that we gave Glenn, he would run with. And he was this fearless, wild creative, and it was super fun. And then a couple weeks later, he was doing a book, and he asked me to do the pictures, and I did that. And we developed this relationship where I realized, and he told me specifically, you can take any picture you want. I will do it because I trust you. And we went on and developed a friendship and a working relationship for years. When he had the rally in Washington at the height of Fox News, and 300,000 people or whatever show up at this rally, he had been working on this speech the whole summer. And the day before the speech, he wants to read the speech to me in his hotel suite. And I go there, and he reads this speech, and he's so proud of it. He goes, "Wow, what do you think?" I said, "You're totally missing the point." I said, "You have these people that have one-on-one relationships with you. They're listening to you alone at the gym, on the elliptical. They're listening to you alone commuting. They're listening to you alone doing the dishes at home. They're all coming together to have a group experience, and they're all on board with your politics. You don't have to talk about politics. They are coming to have a group experience with someone that they love. How can you not use the word love in your talk?" And that conversation became the basis of our friendship.
Wow.
Because we're both really searching for beauty, yes, but searching for love. And it's not that we need to be loved, although you could argue that possibly, but that we are searching for that place that we all love, and we are searching and trying to show how we are all connected. And one thing that I do every single time I pick up the camera, whether it's with the Obamas or whether it's with these construction workers I shot in Boulder last week, who were extraordinary, is I say, what I am doing is putting love out in the world. That's what I do, and that's what I'm searching for. And I did it with Glenn Beck. We disagree on absolutely everything politically. He is wrong on everything. However, we became extremely close friends because the friendship transcended the politics.
Wow.
It was about how we connect. And when you look at the politics in the world right now, and if you could get more people understanding that it's not the politics, it's how we treat each other.
Yeah.
That is so important. And the real tragedy of what's going on now in Washington is people are treating each other so disrespectfully and so badly. And that is just the exact opposite of what my mission is in the world.
Wow. Well, this has been truly amazing. I can see now why Joseph referred you, and I can't thank you enough for taking the time to join us and sharing your story and your insights with our listeners. Where can people learn more about you and your work?
On my website, which is Lange Studio, Lange studio.com. I'm at george.lang, Lange, on Instagram and on Facebook.
Excellent. And for everybody listening, we will wrap the show with that. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Unmistakable Creative Podcast. While you were listening, were there any moments you found fascinating, inspiring, instructive, maybe even heartwarming? Can you think of anyone, a friend or a family member who would appreciate this moment? If so, take a second and share today's episode with that one person, because good ideas and messages are meant to be shared.